Welcome to the Innovation of Work podcast. Today, our theme is manufacturing innovation, and I could not be more excited to have a guest speaker who is both a friend and someone that I actually look up to quite a bit. Anurag Garg is the Vice President of Product Management for Platform Analytics and IoT at Plex Systems. He's responsible for a broad number of things for Plex's connected manufacturing and in IntelliPlex products. Did I say that right?
That is correct.
Okay, perfect. So glad to have you today. Excited to jump into a number of fun topics. So welcome to our podcast.
Thank you for having me, Robin. I've been excited for this all week. So
awesome.
Looking forward to a fun conversation.
Yeah. Well, I want to start off with just digging in a bit to your background, because your origin story is very interesting and inspirational for me personally. You began as an entrepreneur while still in school at Purdue. And your accomplishments there really helped springboard you into founding a company and becoming a CEO during that period of time. So I'd love for you to tell a bit about your entrepreneurial journey and some key points along the way.
Absolutely. So my last venture, I started in 2013 called Bearing Analytics, but there's actually a story before the story that I don't think you and I have ever talked about.
Oh, okay. Awesome.
Which might shed some light on, talking about innovation and how you get an innovation mindset. So my first venture, the entrepreneurial bug, actually bit me way back when in high school.
Okay.
I went to a British international school in Thailand. And in the UK, there's this organization called Young Enterprise, which teaches young people, kind of gives them the skills, the competencies, the mindsets to be able to make the most of everyday challenges and opportunities, and be entrepreneurial where you can be. So I was a part of that program and started my first business in high school, if you can call that a business, calling ourselves Chameleon Cards. We made and sold greeting cards.
Oh, wow. No, I didn't know that. That's awesome.
That market. And we got a loan, got a digital photo printer that did edge-to-edge printing, which is a brand new thing. We got a pirated copy of Hallmark's card creation software to build cards.
I did not just hear that word.
It's been long enough. But, had an absolute blast. And, not only was it a fun ride, we were able to take all the money that we had earned and donate it to the tsunami relief efforts.
Oh, wow.
Back in Southeast Asia at the end of 2004. So
awesome.
It was a good exposure to starting something, being entrepreneurial, and then doing good with it, right? So,
yeah.
Fast forward to my time at Purdue. Purdue's got a great entrepreneurial ecosystem and a good framework within their business plan competitions in entrepreneurship school to vet and test ideas. So I think in my entire 9 years at Purdue or 10 years at Purdue, I must have dabbled with 6 or 7 different ideas and attempts to start something, right? There was a software company to help simplify the student apartment rental experience, because we all know how frustrating that is. There was an idea to help reduce piracy of movies and music on college campuses.
Also
in a way that would help universities protect the students, because students are becoming subject to these lawsuits. There was an IoT venture to help with water conservation in the agriculture industry. Until we realized we knew nothing about agriculture. That wasn't going to go anywhere.
I didn't know that you had so many different such a variety of entrepreneurial, and you're just naturally called to this, clearly.
I call myself an engineer by training and an entrepreneur at heart. So I went to Purdue for engineering, and I jumped into a direct PhD, wanting to be at the bleeding edge of tech. Also, somewhere in me, I guess I realized I must have made a terrible engineer, because that just didn't belong as much. But in 2013, we realized there was a sensor technology we had developed at Purdue in our research lab to monitor the health of mechanical bearings. And originally developed for the Navy, but with applications across heavy industry. And we realized there was potential to use this to apply this in the wind industry to reduce unplanned downtime in wind turbines and reduce the cost of maintenance, and apply this to the rail industry. And the idea was, we could, with wind and rail, we could help improve sustainability of clean energy and reduce the cost of clean energy and sustainable modes of transportation. So we took this and pitched it at a clean energy business plan competition. Department of Energy does I don't know if they still do, but they used to do a clean energy competition, which was a national student business plan competition.
Okay.
And we ended up winning the Midwest Regional Challenge which came with a $100,000 check.
That's a substantial check.
It was a substantial check, and it was, for grad students, it was okay, what do we do? Do we split this 4 ways and go to Vegas, or do we actually start something decent? But that's how it got started. We called ourselves Bearing Analytics, and fast forward the summer of 2013, we went and did about 400 customer development conversations, just to understand. We've got an idea, we've got a technology, we've got some capital. Is this enough to start a business? Are we solving the right problem?
Right.
And what the market told us was, sensors are great. This is a great widget, but what we really want is we want the crystal ball. Can you tell me 2 weeks before my machines fail if they're going to fail? Yeah. And we realized there was an easier entry point in the automotive manufacturing industry. Mm-hmm. The gap was, how do you take data from manufacturing floors and make it available to the operator with contextual insights? So it's not just a sensor reading, but it's your weather app, right? 20% chance of failure in 2 days sort of thing.
So it's really the predictive piece that they were interested in.
Predictive piece, yeah. It was empowering users with data and then giving them the foresight to prevent disruption before it happened on a manufacturing floor. And the value case, of course, was every hour of downtime cost $5,000 to $50,000 per hour per machine on a manufacturing floor. So how much did that reduce? Had a blast running that business for several years. Fortunately, right place, right time. Ended up on the Forbes 30 under 30 list as a result of that.
That's amazing.
Got a chance to work with some of the biggest automotive manufacturers, Harley Davidson and Toyota, all the way down to a scrap yard in the middle of nowhere, Missouri, a small customer, right? So just had an absolute blast. Built a team in US and Pune to serve this. So ran that venture for about 5 years and had a lot of fun doing it.
That is so awesome. I love that story. And I know we haven't hit on all of the milestones and all that you've accomplished. There's a very long list when I look at your bio that is so very impressive. Well, let's talk a bit about, okay, you started this business and then you ended up, merging your company, that'll be my words, with Plex several years ago. Can you tell us about how that came about and how that transition occurred? And then you've got a new role. I'd love to hear about the role that you're in today and kind of what you're focused on.
Yeah. So we got acquired by Plex. Excuse me. We got acquired by Plex in 2018, in summer of 2018. And it was, again, a very opportunistic thing. Had known one of the Plex board members from a conference previously. Plex is a 25-year-old company that provides manufacturing software solutions to primarily the automotive industry, but now vertically across food and beverage and others as well.
Right.
Helping manufacturers do everything from managing production, scrap, inventory on the shop floor, to managing financials on the top floor, managing their suppliers, all the way to finished goods, including tracking work in progress. I mean, talk about shop floor to top floor supply chain to customer.
Yeah.
In a single view, and all the tools to help manage your business in a single enterprise suite.
That really sounds like end to end.
It was fantastic, and one of the visions we had with Datus was, all this data that we're collecting off of manufacturing floors for predictive maintenance is fantastic, but what do you do with it, right? What context does it fit into? And with the Plex leadership team, when we started having those conversations, the vision just fit. that it was a chance to continue to build the vision we were after with devs.
Right.
Taking now shop floor machine level data and plugging this into this larger contextual view of running the entire manufacturing enterprise. Culture-wise, great fit. Love the team, love the people. So my role now is I lead the product management efforts for part of the Plex portfolio. That includes our IoT offering, our analytics and data platform offering, our core platform for MES and ERP business, our EDI offerings, as well as a user experience framework.
Okay.
So
just a small role.
It's just a small role. But it's going from being an entrepreneur to being part of a larger enterprise. Can sometimes be challenging, but kind of what's helped me stick is not only this culture of innovation and continuous improvement, but also the chance to continue to operate somewhat like an entrepreneur in the role of product management, right? So I get all the fun of building products and selling and seeing change with the vision without the stresses of having to manage cash flow and P&L and keeping people paid. So there's smarter people who run that at Plex, and I get to focus on the part that I enjoy.
No, that sounds like a really good fit. That's awesome. Well, so I can tell from talking to you still, and I knew this from the day I met you, that you are so passionate about the opportunity to improve manufacturing and to innovate in manufacturing. Could you talk to me a little bit about, what keeps you engaged and passionate, with what you're doing and what you guys are achieving at Plex?
Yeah, it's interesting. I talked about the young enterprise story in my first venture and kind of how that bug of being enterprising and understanding everyday problems and challenges and making the world a better place. That's still what drives me even with manufacturing. What keeps me excited is how much potential there is for transformation in this industry. And I look at it from both sides, right? On one side, manufacturers and manufacturing both are facing some serious headwinds if you think about what the future may look like. Right? 40% of the manufacturing workforce will retire in the next 10 years. How do manufacturers continue to grow their businesses? 2 out of 3 manufacturing plants are more than 20 years old. So you're trying to drive growth and operational efficiency and profits with aging infrastructure. There's accelerating technology out there, and this is one of those industries where you can't drive transformation with the top 10% of the market. You have to take everyone along because it's all one interconnected web, and you can't leave someone behind, right? So, industry transformation is a big push. It's challenging, but that's kind of what makes it exciting for an entrepreneur. But on the other side, the fundamental definition of what it takes to compete as a manufacturer has evolved. If you see what's happened in this industry over the last 6 months, right? It's clear those manufacturers who are able to be agile are the ones that will succeed long term. Right? The number of automotive parts manufacturers that transition to making ventilators, and greeting card companies that shifted to making PPE equipment. Excuse me. And food and beverage companies that transitioned to making hand sanitizer. I mean, it's phenomenal how agility has helped some of these manufacturers succeed and continue to grow. And how do you drive an industry transformation with that need for agility, global supply chains, lots of opportunities for efficiency improvement and cutting waste. So as an engineer who's out there looking to creatively solve problems, looking for efficiency and realizing how much transformation manufacturing is about to go through and can go through. It's just there's so much opportunity and it's hard not to get excited.
So I think one of the things that I'm really impressed with, you mentioned the fact of how quickly companies have, kind of pivoted to make ventilators and PPE and all manner of things. And that's done in record time with a really compelling event, right? Something really had to happen in some cases for really kind of the survival of the company, but also to meet a critical need, globally. So I guess my question, maybe a follow-up question for you would be that agile mindset can help transform the whole industry. What do you think has to happen for us to continue with that level of agility for manufacturing transformation, which could mean dramatic changes for all the companies that are kind of riding along with that change?
Absolutely, and it's the more and more I think about it, and if you think about what drives agility and all the other things we do, it's our ability to respond to change, right? It's our ability to take data and process the data quickly and then be able to respond to it and shift course of action if need be, right? We see that in how we do software development.
Yes.
We see that in how we run our startups. We see that in how large enterprises behave. So manufacturing floors are not that different. For manufacturers to be agile, they have to have the infrastructure to be able to collect data, consume data, and be able to pivot based on what new information they're seeing, right? The our old archaic paradigm of 200 software systems to solve one problem each, or keeping paper trails of data that takes forever to kind of sift through and figure out what's going on. You just can't respond to it fast enough. And then, of course, there's the shifting manufacturing lines and what you can and cannot do, and being closer to supply chains. All those things factor in. But it's the idea that can you run your entire enterprise or ecosystem in a coherent manner, or are you running each of your 200 pieces individually and separately without clear integration?
Yeah. The integration piece is always really fascinated me from my previous roles in supply chain and, MES systems. And I can't, it's hard for me to get my head wrapped around not having access to all the different pieces of data that you might need, or dealing with n number of systems. It's just, it's hard for me to get my head wrapped around. It's also hard for me to kind of get my head wrapped around where are we with IoT. And I know you've got significant experience in the Internet of Things. Can you, especially in this space, could you talk a little bit about what does this even mean? Give me a definition of IoT and kind of what are the trends that you're seeing given the backdrop of this need to be agile and systems and data? Could you talk a bit about that?
Yeah. So, we throw around the term IoT, become a bit of a buzzword.
Yes.
But one of the best explanations that I heard that simplified IoT for me early on in my career in this field was that it's nothing but the convergence of two technology revolutions we've seen and heard for a long time, right? One is the information systems revolution that started with DARPA, that allowed people to communicate across vast distances across the internet, and all the e-commerce stuff that started with. And the other is the embedded systems revolution, right? Which is how much power can you put in a chip to help control the physical world around you?
Right.
If you put these embedded systems, these things on the internet, now you can not only help people communicate, but you could allow exchange of information between physical subsystems, these things that drive better efficiency, right? So in the consumer world, your coffee machine might know when you got out of bed to start making your fresh cup of coffee before you have to press the button.
Yes, it does. That is an absolute requirement.
Exactly. But on the manufacturing floor, there's some really, really, really interesting use cases, right? A manufacturing floor is this massively interconnected system of machines and material flow and people movement, where every action impacts the next. And the ability to pull massive volumes of data off the manufacturing floor and be able to contextualize it and drive better decision making is what IoT enables, right? So if I have 5 CNC machines running the production line, and if I see one start to fail, can my system tell me how to distribute the workload across the other 4 so I still meet my production targets?
Yeah.
If I have a manufacturing facility in Indiana and another one in California, and if I see a failure on a pump in California, could that data instantly help notify against a potential of becoming failure on a pump in Indiana, right? Could you help these machines learn from each other? And one part of it is the data collection, the other part of it is contextualization and decision making. So, as an example, one of our customers at Plex was able to use IoT on the shop floor. They're a vertically integrated metals manufacturer.
Okay.
And one of the steps is they take stamped metal parts and they heat treat them. It goes through a long heat treat furnace and a quench tank and whatnot. And from the start of the process, again, the process takes about an hour, and they have no visibility into what the machine, what
was happening,
conditions the parts may be going through.
Yeah.
If they see failure on this furnace, it's a week's worth of downtime because you have to wait for the 1600 degree furnace to cool down. You have to change the parts out. 5 figures worth of parts plus labor plus lost production.
Yeah.
They were able to get to a 30% reduction in unplanned machine downtime.
Oh wow, that's
and
huge.
A 10% reduction in planned maintenance expense, and a 10% improvement in job transition time.
That's
talk
amazing.
About what access to data can do to help a manufacturer be more agile.
Yeah.
Right. I can plan downtime in between shifts and fix things before it takes my system down during production hours. Right.
Right.
Predictive maintenance is one of the easiest use cases to get a hang of.
Yeah.
You think about using IoT on manufacturing floors to improve data access, improve data accuracy, provide notification for early warnings, right? Your check engine light in your car, or your weather app that says so much time before rain, or take an umbrella out, prevent disruption, improve quality control, improve traceability, right? So if I have a bad part, can I trace it all the way back to the manufacturing plant and say which other parts were impacted? What was the machine doing when this part was being manufactured? And can I quarantine the 10 parts that may have been impacted as opposed to recall everything that was manufactured that month?
Right.
If you think about those applications in the automotive industry and preventative recalls, like we had with the airbags, and in the food and bev industry, right, preventing the scale of recalls we've had with contaminant outbreaks in food. Right. That's the power of what data and IoT and shop floors can do.
That's pretty amazing. And there's no doubt that's just the tip of the iceberg and some of the stories you have. I'm curious, what about how, IoT in kind of that process optimization piece, how does that help the frontline worker? Are there applications that you can think of where there's a direct correlation for that worker, whether they're doing that unplanned maintenance or now the planned maintenance because you were proactive, or maybe in another scenario?
Yeah. So there's plenty of applications. Early on in the days of bearing analytics, we spent a lot of time in the surface coal mines in West Virginia, and got my first introduction to IoT for safety. Where these heavy machines, the workers would be wearing a vest with sensors, and these machines would stop moving or power off if they got to within 10 feet of an operator. Right. Talk about IoT to help improve safety.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you think about IoT to help improve time savings. I'm not phrasing that the right way. IoT to save time on manufacturing floors, right? Yeah. How much time does it take to go and manually record temperature and vibration for maintenance applications?
When you can,
and then maintain paper trails when you can automatically collect that data and use people time for things where humans add value. And automate the process that could be automated. We spent some time at big trailer manufacturer in their paint booth line several years ago. And they had a wastewater control process where they take wastewater, treat it before dumping it back to the city. And their approach to compliance was the environmental and health safety person would walk up to this wastewater control system, take manual readings once a day, go back to his desk, record them in Excel, maintain that paper trail for so long. You could automate that data collection and provide early warnings as opposed to kind of go through manual process. And the translation of that on manufacturing floors for frontline workers is preventing them from having to go into, say, septic environments or hazardous environments to collect data. So much could be automated and improve the safety of the equipment of the people.
Yeah. So when you think about kind of the hierarchy of controls and, controlling and engineering out the risks for people, that's where this is huge. And then certainly there is a leverage brains for something different, right? When tech can actually do the work. So
exactly. And if you overlay that with the idea that 40% of the workforce will retire in 10 years.
Yes.
How do manufacturers continue to operate if not, automate the tasks that can be automated and use human labor to do what only people can do?
Yeah, absolutely. It makes total sense. We're losing years and years of expertise. So there is a huge need to automate because we are losing that expertise as people retire out. So
exactly.
Well, let's zoom out a bit. Yeah. So let's talk a bit about the trends that you see, maybe more broadly toward the transition to smart manufacturing. I know you've talked a bit today about maybe some of the manufacturing systems that are in place that maybe aren't that modern. So what's happening from a trend perspective to modernize systems from a manufacturing perspective?
So the last 6 months have been eye-opening for manufacturers, both from the perspective of technology vendors as well as manufacturers that we talk to. And I talked about the definition of competitiveness in manufacturing. The fundamental paradigm for what it takes to compete has shifted to you need to be more agile, you need to be more responsive, you need to be better able to leverage data. And manufacturers are now realizing the urgency and the need to do that. Otherwise, they may struggle to stay in business. And what that's translating to is, a lot more manufacturers are fundamentally taking a hard look at moving away from old school paper processes to automation and maintaining a digital thread, because that helps improve responsiveness. A lot more manufacturers are looking at moving to cloud systems as opposed to on-prem, right? We had a number of manufacturers that said we could run our business through this pandemic because we did not have to have on-prem IT serving and managing these 200 IT systems that we had.
I forget about those days. I've been working in cloud technology so long. I forget about what it's like to have those on-prem systems. It's a heavy lift.
Exactly. It's painful to manage. And it's a heavy lift, and you have to be there in person to run it.
Yeah.
A lot of manufacturers are realizing, the need for the single pane of glass, right? We had a customer that when I say 200 systems, I wasn't exaggerating.
It was literally
this big kind of wheel hub manufacturer for the heavy trucking industry, and they had 200 different subsystems that ran their enterprise. They consolidated down to something in the single digits.
Wow.
And the efficiency that came with, helping keep the entire enterprise aligned. A lot of manufacturers are realizing the risks that supply chains introduce, and globally distributed supply chains introduce. So they're looking at how do we manage supply chain risk and maybe move things closer together. They're realizing the need to have accurate tracking of inventory and work in progress. And the ability to respond quickly, right? So if you look at that at a high level, what the last 6 months have done to the manufacturing industry through this pandemic is it's kind of accelerated this manufacturing transformation we've been talking about.
Yeah.
Because it's become clear, if you don't do this, you will become dinosaurs and you will struggle to exist.
Yeah.
And it's exciting because manufacturing is generally known to be slow to adopt technology,
Yeah.
and this is accelerating the transformation.
No, that makes total sense. And we talked a bit already about COVID's impact, and you talked about ventilators and PPE really adapting a manufacturing floor to produce something else. I want to talk a bit about other impacts kind of COVID on manufacturing, and it could be that you got to be more competitive right now, and you need to think about retrofitting your manufacturing floor. I'm curious about that, and what do you see some of the impacts are? And then I have a very simple question. I view it simple, but I'd love to hear your take on it. And so, there's clearly still supply chain issues that we have for a number of products. And, we know we had kind of a run on paper goods, for instance, early when the pandemic hit. And, it's still sometimes challenging to find unique goods, and paper goods still seem to be sort of an issue. So I'd love to kind of hear your take on, kind of COVID's impact on manufacturing, and how that can kind of serve as, again, a tailwind and some momentum to drive some of the changes that perhaps are needed.
Yeah. So, the where my mind went when you were asking that question, and this may be sidebarring a little bit, but I think back to the automotive revolution, and when cars became a big thing, moving from horse buggies to cars.
Yep.
There were a number of industries that were transformed, not just the transportation industry.
Right.
Right. Those who bred horses, right? That whole industry, and the agriculture feed industry completely was transformed.
Yeah.
The financing industry was transformed because people were buying cars, and how do you provide financing?
Right.
Infrastructure. So I think about the same in the context of manufacturing, right? Putting on my thinking hat for a second here.
Sure.
We're talking about manufacturers needing to be more agile and being more responsive in the face of change. And we've heard manufacturers talk about putting plexiglass up on the manufacturing floors to help the workers work safely. We've heard manufacturers talk about how much of our business we could do remotely, with only a few people needing to be on site, and the rest looking at the facility from their homes and managing it that way. We've also heard manufacturers talk about how it's become more and more critical to get accurate data. So you can imagine the increase you'll see in sensor sales over time.
Yeah, without a doubt.
How IT infrastructure is going to change. But the other big one is supply chain. So we're actually seeing a lot of manufacturers talk about moving supply chains closer together. And not relying on globally distributed supply chains, because it does have a high risk of disruption.
Right.
And you can think about what impact that may have on nearshoring manufacturing or development across the industry, and not just automotive, but across other industries. I've spent less time in the paper industry. So I'm not as familiar with the impact that industry would have had or would have, or how that might transform. But we're looking at the food and beverage industry, for example, and you think about these vegan imitation meat products. That rely on the peas industry for protein. And you can imagine what that supply chain looked like before and after the pandemic, as demand skyrocketed, and not just the manufacturing side, but the agriculture side. Right? So it's interesting. It's interesting to watch what's happening, and exciting at the same time.
Yeah, and no, those are all really good points. I think it is, as a consumer, you kind of have a lens of what you think
Mhm.
and kind of how you view things. And then you think about manufacturing has changed so much over time, as you
Mhm.
mentioned. And, you know, um, there's certainly warehouses in many places that have lots of goods. Those get depleted and you're doing just in time manufacturing,
Mhm.
then, it's a longer time to replenish that supply or meet that demand. So it's very interesting dynamic that we've created for a number of products.
Exactly. So one of our customers, Toyotetsu, which is one of the biggest suppliers to the Toyota supply chain,
Right.
um, they've been able to get to a point with Plex where they maintain 2 hours of inventory on the plant floor.
Okay. Yeah.
2 hours,
Yeah.
right? So I mean, you can imagine the agility that takes to track and manage and make
Yeah.
sure there's 2 hours worth of inventory. Everything else is
Yeah.
off the plant floor, right?
Yeah.
That's truly just in time. And then how you need to manage a supply chain behind that to maintain, 2 hours and not more
Yeah.
of inventory.
Yeah.
Uh,
That is extreme optimization, right?
exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
that's amazing. Well,
It's
so
interesting when most of us talk about manufacturing, we think about big factories that make cars and automotive parts and whatnot. But um, it every time I talk to someone who's new to manufacturing, I kind of have to remind them that look at every physical thing around you.
yes.
It has come to you from some manufacturing floor.
Yes.
Right? We wouldn't live in this material world that we live in if it wasn't for the critical role that manufacturing plays in our lives.
Absolutely.
And sometimes we forget that when we look at everything, like my monitor, my coffee mug, the blinds, this piece of
Yeah.
paper, right?
Yeah.
Everything.
Yeah. Well, and too, it's not, the manufacturers, there are raw materials in manufactured goods in
Mhm.
parts, and it's not all manufactured in-house.
Mhm.
So there's lots of manufacturers that go into, these lovely devices that
Yeah.
we love so well,
Yeah.
and in the food and beverages and all the things that we consume. So it's certainly interesting to me that COVID, I think, has put a spotlight on manufacturing and
Mhm.
supply chain in general and
Yep.
logistics.
Yep.
Um, and I think it's perhaps pointed out that, a lot of consumers don't necessarily understand, uh,
Mhm.
how the supply chain works today and
Yep.
how optimized it is.
Yep.
And when we end up having kind of these rushes, and this demand for goods that normally don't have this kind of peak, then
Mhm.
and it puts pressure on the supply chain for sure. It also creates a lot of opportunity, as we talked about, agile manufacturing and
Yep.
opportunities to continue to drive improvements.
Yep.
Well,
Yep.
so one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, and you've got a couple more questions for you.
Mhm.
What we're super passionate about, digital transformation for what we do with Anvil. Our whole goal is to help move frontline workers, particularly around safety, from
Mhm.
those paper forms and processes to digital, especially for workers that are in those highly dynamic and hazardous environments. So I'd
Mhm.
love to kind of get your take on this. We still see across the board, irrespective of the industry, there are huge amounts of dependency on paper,
Mhm.
especially for frontline workers. And that's despite all the wonderful tech that we have in place and software devices and mobile devices. And, what would you tell leaders in those companies about the importance for innovation as it relates to those frontline workers, or innovation for the frontline workers?
I mean, keeping the workers in mind, there's two things that I keep going back to. I mentioned a couple times, 40% of the manufacturing workforce will retire in 10 years.
Yeah.
And I cannot stress enough why that is so important. Because for manufacturers to compete, they need to find a way to fill that talent or look for efficiencies that they could operate with fewer people. And if they need to find ways to fill that talent, the next generation of millennial talent they want to hire
Yeah.
don't always want to work in a manufacturing plant, right? Because the
Yeah.
industry is considered archaic and old school.
Yep.
You think, someone who relies on this for everything all day long. I'm holding up my cell phone for someone who might not be watching the video. Do you think they will want to go work in a paper-based process? Do you think that's going to fulfill them day to day, right? So I always think about, are you catering to the needs of not only your current workforce, but your evolving workforce? Technology and digital transformation helps cater to attracting that, millennial talent. Business efficiency aside, I think that point's been beat to death, right? How much value it can drive for business.
Absolutely.
But you have to think about, how will you attract the next generation of talent? And that part's extremely critical.
Go ahead. I was going to say I couldn't agree more on that, because I view that kind of the younger worker today. I mean, they've had smartphones since they were 10. If you hand them a clipboard, a paper, and say go fill all this out, they just got through looking at the news and sports reports and texting their kids, and so it is just so foreign for them to think about I'm working for this innovative company that probably builds very innovative things, manufactures innovative things. Why are we still on paper? It's definitely something that we see that needs to that we need to think about solving it.
Completely agreed. And the second part of that is not only to think about technology from the perspective of how it appeals to the end users, but also how you drive adoption. Right. In the world of digital transformation or Industry 4.0, we hear a lot about this term McKinsey coined, pilot purgatory. And a lot of manufacturers try new technologies and then get stuck in what they call pilot purgatory. Right, they just never get past pilots. And again, keeping the people in mind, what we've found is a successful formula for transformation is to think about change management, technology, people, process. And a lot of manufacturers think about the technology and how it would improve the process, but they forget to bring the people alongside it. They forget to help change behaviors and practices on manufacturing floors. And if you forget the people, you're never going to drive this change management, right? So I talked about the manufacturing ecosystem being this massive interconnected web, and you have to move the entire industry along. The same happens with people on the manufacturing floor, right? It's all these interconnected systems of physical assets and individual people and behaviors. You have to move everything along together, otherwise transformation is hard to see. So thinking about frontline workers, it's critical to think about both those things, right? Appealing to the next generation of talent, but also involving the people in this transformation.
I think too, I agree with that completely. And I think another thing that's interesting is, while you want to involve the people, I think there is some fear around involving the people. You got union shops, and you got maybe the frontline worker that still uses a flip phone and doesn't want to be hassled with new technology. But I think what we found is that frontline workers are very resilient, and if there is value that they see, it doesn't take a lot to get them on board. There may be resistance and maybe some pushback initially, but if solutions add value and you engage them, as you mentioned, in the process early, then actually the move to digital can actually, and off paper, can actually occur much faster. It doesn't take year-long pilots to make sure that you bring everybody along. That can actually happen pretty fast. So I think that's certainly on my personal wish list, that to your point about pilots, that we could get off paper faster, because there's so much benefit there for really everybody involved. All right, so last question, and I know you've got this. So let's talk about your personal wish list. Where would you like to see innovation go in your lifetime? Kind of what would you like to see, and why is it important? Anything goes. It doesn't have to be manufacturing, but I'd love to get your take on this as a entrepreneurial leader, and really kind of I view you as an inventor.
Sure. Thank you. It's interesting. I'm a technologist and entrepreneur, so stuff like this is always on my mind.
Yeah.
And my wife and I were talking about something similar just a few days ago, and we're talking about, can you imagine 25 years ago what we have in our daily lives that we consider normal today
Yeah.
was the thing, was part of science fiction, right?
Oh yeah.
Talking to a voice assistant like Siri or Alexa, and
Yeah.
barking commands, expecting this thing to respond and do what you want, or self-driving cars where you can take your hands off the wheel and the car will take you where you want to go,
Yeah.
or playing chess with an AI bot and
Yeah.
get into a full good quality game. Um, I I could really think of so many more examples, but it's amazing how far technology and innovation has come 25 years ago, and we
Yeah.
may never have expected it this way. Like playing virtual reality or augmented reality games on your phone. I mean,
Pretty amazing.
this was all science fiction back then. Um, um, so as I think about what the next 25 years may look like, um, the thing that excites me the most, perhaps, is the power of artificial intelligence
Yeah.
and AI, and what it's going to do to transform our lives across multiple fields and multiple disciplines. We're already seeing glimpses of what it can do for digital assistants or
Right.
self-driving cars. But I think there's an opportunity to use AI to solve problems we don't even know how to frame yet.
That's true. Yeah.
Right, and taking that a step further, this is another thing the last few years have shown us is um, good innovation versus bad innovation,
Yeah.
and how good technology in the wrong hands could be uh, uh, could have painful consequences.
Yeah.
So I'd love to see us move towards a framework for responsible innovation.
Yeah. I like that. Yeah.
And if too much of what we innovate with and what we do today is driven by capitalist needs, uh, what if it was driven by social needs to
Right.
make the world a better place, right? I don't know if I've got the answer, but what's the guardrails you could put in place to think about how to control the innovation that you have to make sure it's a force for good and not a force for evil?
Yeah.
Is that something AI could help you model out, right? Play that game of chess 30 years out and see what you need to control, what you need to do. But, that's what I think about. The pace of innovation is super exciting.
Yeah.
But
Absolutely.
if only there's a way we could guarantee this was responsible innovation,
Yeah.
I'd feel safe. Knowing what we're doing is a world I'd be comfortable letting my kids grow up in,
Yeah.
or live in, like long after we're gone, right? The next generation, the generation after that. How do we get to responsible innovation? So that's the first thing that comes to mind.
No, that's a lot to take in and think about. And I think those are amazing points. I am much older than you and still marvel at my cell phone or my smartphone every day. Um, but when you think about how we could apply innovation to, as you mentioned, social change, and even
Mm-hmm.
what we've done, we'll go back to COVID again, what
Mm-hmm.
companies have done to innovate and move fast
Yeah,
to supply the needed equipment. We obviously need more, but there's so much opportunity. It's very exciting,
exactly.
exciting times. Well, as always, I absolutely enjoy Ty. You and I can talk all day long.
I know we could. This was a pleasure.
Yeah, thoroughly enjoy our conversation. Appreciate your viewpoints and the color. So thanks so much for joining us today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.